ElGreco, 1541 to 1614. ElGreco, whose name means the Greek, was a Greek artist whose painting and sculpture helped define the Spanish Renaissance and was an influence of various movements to come. Dominicus Theotokopoulos was born in Crete around 1541, which at the time was a Republic of Venice. ElGreco received his initial training as a painter of a Cretan school, which was considered the leading center of post-Byzantine art. In Candia, he studied ancient Greece and Latin classics and organized a painters' guild that was based on the Italian model. By the age of 22, ElGreco was already a master of the guild and presumably operating his own workshop. Somewhere around 1567, ElGreco went to Venice to study and found himself studying under Titan, the greatest painter of the time. Under Titan, ElGreco began mastering the fundamental aspects of Renaissance painting, working on aspects of perspective, constructing figures, and staging detailed narrative scenes. A prime example of his work from this period is the miracle of Christ healing the blind. Unlike other Cretan artists who had moved to Venice, ElGreco substantially altered his style and distinguished himself by inventing new and unusual interpretations of traditional religious subject matter. Although ElGreco was technically considered Mannerist, his early work is very reminiscent of Byzantine art, by which he was heavily influenced. In 1570, ElGreco moved to Rome, where he executed a series of works strongly marked by his Venetian apprenticeship. Determined to make his mark in Rome, Greco was quick to praise artists such as Correggio and Parmigianino, but also did not hesitate to dismiss Michelangelo's Last Judgment in the Sistine Chapel. He had extended an offer to Pope Pius V to paint over Michelangelo's work in accord with the new and stricter Catholic thinking. When he was later asked what he thought about Michelangelo, ElGreco replied, "He was a good man, but he did not know how to paint." Greco later would realize that he could not escape Michelangelo's influence, which can be seen in works such as the Elegy of the Holy League, Dream of Philip II. Because of the unconventional views of the great artist of the day and his strong personality, Greco soon acquired enemies in Rome. In 1577, ElGreco immigrated first to Madrid, then to Toledo, Spain. At the time, Toledo was a religious capital of Spain and a populous city with an illustrious past. Soon, ElGreco would secure his first large commission, a signed contract for a group of paintings that was to adorn the church of Santo Domingo al Antiguo in Toledo. By September 1579, he had completed 9 paintings for Santo Domingo, including the Trinity and the Assumption of the Virgin. In 1585, ElGreco established a workshop capable of producing altar frames and statues as well as paintings. He also appeared to have hired an assistant, Italian painter Francesco Preboste. His workshop created pictorial and sculptural pieces for a variety of institutions. ElGreco's activity as a sculptor was marginal to that of his painting. He produced small models in clay, plaster, and wood, which he created as studies for figures in his paintings. ElGreco also produced models for some carvings on his altarpieces from which professional sculptors would work. The contract for the altarpiece of Santo Domingo Antiguo required him to make models for 2 wooden prophet figures and 3 virtues that were to be carved by Juan Bautista Monegro. In addition, he produced finished sculptures himself, notably the relief of the Imposition of the Chasuble on St. Ildefonso, scarcity of Toledo Cathedral. Some of ElGreco's more famous sculptures is the Risen Christ from the Tabernacle of the Tavera Hospital, and seen here are 2 small figures of Prometheus and Pandora. On March 12, 1586, ElGreco obtained the commission for his most celebrated painting, The Burial of Count Orgaz. It was commissioned by parish priest Santo Tome in Toledo in 1586 to celebrate the restitution of a financial obligation to the church. It honors a long-dead benefactor at whose funerals St. Stephen and Augustine were seen to miraculously appear to assist in the burial. The picture depicts this miracle as well as the Count's soul being received into paradise. During the decade 1597 to 1607, ElGreco received several major commissions. Some commissions of this period were 3 altars of the chapel of St. Jose in Toledo, 3 paintings for the Colegio de Maria de Aragon, a monastery in Madrid, and a high altar for the Hospital of Charity in Velasquez. Minutes recorded during the commission of the Virgin of the Immaculate Conception by members of the municipality describe ElGreco as one of the greatest men in both this kingdom and outside it. Between 1607 and 1608, ElGreco was involved in a protractual legal dispute with the authorities of the Hospital of Charity in Velasquez concerning payment for his work, which included painting, sculpture, and architecture. This and other legal disputes contributed to the economic difficulties he experienced towards the end of his life. In 1608, he received his last major commission for the Hospital of St. John the Baptist in Toledo. During the course of the execution of a commission for the Hospital Tavera, ElGreco fell seriously ill, and a month later, on April 7, 1614, he died. A few days earlier, on March 31st, he had directed his son should have the power to make his will. 2 Greek friends of a painter witnessed this last will and testament. ElGreco never lost touch with his Greek origins. He was buried in the church of Santo Domingo in Antigua. ElGreco was unworthy of respect by his immediate generations after his death because his work was opposed in many respects to the principles of early Baroque style, which became popular near the beginning of the 17th century and soon replaced the last surviving traits of the 16th century mannerism. However, with the arrival of the Romantic sediments in the late 18th century, ElGreco's work were re-examined, and since the 18th century they have been valued by scholars and artists alike and have proved a great source of inspiration for many modern painters. ElGreco's expressiveness and color were particularly inspirational to Delacauze and Manier, seen here in Delacauze, Woman of Algiers, in their apartment. One of the pioneers of Cubism, Paul Cézanne, adopted similar elements to ElGreco, such as the use of space and distortion of bodies, as seen here in Harlequin. During his blue period, Picasso admired the connection of colors in ElGreco's work, and it was highly influential when he created les demoiselles d'Avignon. Link between form and space. Analysis of arrangements of his compositions and the use of highlights. Expressionism was highly inspired by ElGreco's expressive distortions. Not only was ElGreco one of the most influential artists, he was the only Western artist to move the mentality and perception of the art world. With a spiritual basis for his work, he welcomed the new and unseen, while rejecting the perceptions of what art should be, which was something no other artist during this time was willing to do.